Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna say.
Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. More live from the Heartland here for the week of the 10th of January in the year 2025. Regular listeners to this show, regular viewers to this show know that we've talked about Rising Up Angry. It was part of the Rainbow Coalition here in town back in the late 60s into the 70s with the Black Panther Party, Rising Up Angry, the Young Lords, Young Patriots, American Indian Movement. You also may remember that I tell people regularly on this show, particularly during warm months, that I have photographs on my front porch. And I got an email from a young fellow a couple of years back saying he would like, I didn't know he was a young fellow. He said he'd like to show me his pictures and wanted to see my picture. So I figured it was an old dude who had some snapshots. And lo and behold, this fellow named Josh Hord shows up, and he's got photographs of different clubs and gangs and, you know, groups of young people back in the 50s, the 60s, into the 70s. And I got to meet him a few more times, and I'm very impressed with his this project he has. It's called Vintage Fiends, and you can find it on Instagram. Josh, good day to you. Thanks for meeting up with us. And why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of your project? What do you got going on and what it is and how people find it?
Oh, that's right. Thank you for having me. First and foremost, the team and you specifically, Mike. It's been a journey in my life, just growing up in the blue-collar communities of Westtown in Chicago, by Humboldt Park in that area. That introduced me to the whole street culture that is still very rampant down there. But more specifically, when I focused on that era during the 1960s, the turbulent revolutionary times when everybody was going out there and, you know, fighting for a cause, basically. That's how I take it, is they were fighting for something. These days, not many people fight for anything. But back then it was very turbulent times, and through that, the evolution of the street clubs and the gangs came about. Your newspaper, Rising Up Angry, did a massive contribution towards it, because it showcased everything that the local newspapers would not. And now, am I correct by saying that? Like, yeah, there was a lot of focus on various small neighborhood clubs that could have members anywhere from approximately 30 to 50. But these clubs, they're still around, some of them, and that is a fascinating part, that they're still out here making progress. And through my experiences, I've gone around the country meeting with these old members and getting their side of the story, because their stories aren't shared that much in the mainstream media these days, especially if they're old timers in their 60s and 50s. So I've been collecting memorabilia in various news clips, which were archived for a long time and not showcased anywhere. Photographs, the sweaters too, the jackets, everything.
Yeah,
it's been a fascinating journey.
Give us an overview of what that culture was like. What neighborhoods? What were the boundaries? Style of dress? Relationship between the white kids to non-whites, which was changing as the times were changing. A little bit more on that.
Oh yeah. So yeah, basically, the club life started mainly by Taylor Street, where the current UIC campus is at, but also by Pilsen, by 18th Street. That's what's considered sort of the birth of the heavy street clubs and nowadays called gangs. We would notice that in the beginning they would all wear just the Cabretta leathers. Got it on Maxwell Street back then. Some of the well-known shops like Smokey Joe's, just like mine over here, which I have on. That's an original. And years down the road, they incorporated the high school Letterman sweaters. Do you remember the ones with like the cardigan style? Okay, they incorporated those, except they made it their own by putting a club, the insignia, like an emblem patch for the left side and their name on the right side. They would really just do it to get around in the neighborhood and gain a little bit more clout with their buddies there, right? Being a part of something is better than not being a part of something, and than not being a part of anything. So that was a way to get together and do the sports teams as well. There was this thing called the social athletic clubs as well. That goes way back to 1910s and but also the 1920s. Even Richard J. Daley was a part of one of the Hamburgs back there in the turbulent 1910s and the 20s in Chicago during those race riots in 1919. So he was a part of the Hamburgs. And these social athletic clubs, they eventually became just a regular street club and then eventually a game. The members would congregate at schoolyards, right? That's where a lot of your photos were taken, at schoolyards, at parks. And through the years, they kind of, some became more criminally minded than others. Well, that is the nature of the streets. The people have to make money somehow. So guys took up jobs as, dope dealing and things of that nature. But some were righteous till the end too.
Josh Hord, let me ask you, what was the first photograph or gang writing on a wall that you took a picture of? And then how did the collection start to evolve? Because I would say
you have a good question, Mike. The first collection began within my local neighborhood by Ukrainian Village. That's within the Westtown boundaries by Humboldt Park. And more specifically, Chopin Schoolyard, because I lived on that street since I was a kid. When I emigrated out of Ukraine, that was as soon as the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991. And my family settled in the Ukrainian Village neighborhood of Westtown. And therefore, when I met a lot of the old timers that were there since World War II, right? When the displaced people from Europe would settle within industrial cities such as Cleveland, Chicago, Detroit. Knowing all that, I got in touch with certain members which would want to pass me down their old photographs, their old sweaters, and all the memorabilia. But most importantly, they would share their stories. And I would pay attention very, very closely. And taking apart the story, seeing the details, seeing the connections, like how did it translate down the road. And so the first one was Chicago and Westerns Club, Shy West. There was a connection with them since the beginning of the 1960s. The first Chicago police gang detectives were focused on this, specifically that club, the Jokers, the C-Notes, and the Gaylords. And that was around 1961, 1962. That was a lot of good work being done by the social department as well. The youth, the outreach workers back then, they would go out there, do these interviews, put together the minutes and the notes too, which were passed down to me by a professor that was at University of Colorado for a long time. And she was under the guidance of a well-known social worker called James F. Short, and he has since passed away, James Short. He's done a lot of work by Wicker Park with the Playboys, with the Egyptian Cobras of Garfield Park during the 50s. They put out some of the books as well, and that's just been the motivation behind it, to get more stories, to put together something for the common residents of Chicago, which they might not know about, because this stuff is not covered by mainstream media to a certain point.
Well, even Tom Hayden, who was a founder of Students for Democratic Society, did a book on gangs. And I'm sure there are more than one. I mean, there's quite a few. But you really, what's impressive to me about what you are doing is in your site, Vintage Fiends, I have a hard time saying that.
Vintage Fiends, it's Fiend for vintage content.
How many posts do you have up now? I mean,
currently getting to about 900 posts on the Vintage Fiends account. And that account has grown to tremendous, lengths, and it's been very fascinating connecting with all these people. Some of them are, the younger siblings or kids of a father who passed away young. They're sharing their stories. They're digging up their family in photo albums and showcasing me some of the stuff, which was kept just within their family. But now we're sharing it with the online world, and that's always good. Just most importantly, just having the right person to present it, which in this case becomes my job, because there is a little bit more that I know than certain others, because I really dug deep.
Yeah, you got a lot of information. And what is the most exciting or the most What's some encounter you had with somebody that really stands out to you?
There's a couple that stand out. Yeah.
Tell me about
One of the most fun ones that I've had was connected with somebody that Rising Up Angry knows really well. Yeah, Mr. Ronald Peronsky, right? You remember him because he was covered in some of the first back issues of Rising Up Angry back in 1969, I believe, with the meeting with the Black Panthers, Huey Newton.
Yeah, that was a
Ronnie's there
few
shaking
years
hands
later,
with him.
but yeah, Ronnie met with Huey Newton from the Panthers as well as with other Rising Up Angry people. I wasn't at that meeting. I was in the audience taking some pictures.
Ronnie's somebody that originates out of my neighborhood, actually. That's something that we both found out. He lived on Iowa Street by Damon. That's a little bit south of Wicker Park over there. And Ronnie's moved around quite a few times, but he was always a part of the streets, and he was telling me his stories. And when he finally came back for a family visit to a town called Sandwich, Illinois, I made sure to take my time out of my day and drive the 2 hours out that way to sit down with him and conversate. And during those 2 hours, we discussed everything that covered the streets, the neighborhood, the old neighborhood stories as well, which I paid close attention to. But then he discussed the Rising Up Angry days as well. That he was active in and the revolutionary times that that you guys were achieving back then. Power to the people, right?
Well, Ronnie Bronsky was really quite a guy. He was in a lot of trouble a lot of the time we knew him, and then he ended up getting God, and he's a preacher out in Oregon. Josh Hord, your collection of photographs of former gangs and gang pictures is very impressive. How about telling us another story about some encounter or some way that you got a photograph or found a photograph?
One, there's been a couple of during the summer months when I'll come back home to Chicago and I'll be walking around and getting invited to all these cool picnics. And one of the most impressive picnics that I've been to during the latest couple of years were the Jousters of Taylor Street, which originated back in the 1950s. They're still around in tiny numbers, but the old members, they invited me to a picnic by the suburbs this summer. And when we sat down, they dug up this old photo album that was never before showcased to the public anywhere, just within them themselves. They would be seeing this album, but they showed it to me, and they not only that, they gave me permission to share it with the public here, and that's been impressive to the point that some of the photographs showcase things which we've never even thought of seeing, like the alliance in which they had with the Harrison Gents. That's another well-known club that we've seen on the walls putting up their name since the 1960s, the Harrison Gents of Old Town over there by Lincoln Park High School as well. Yeah.
One of the things that impressed me in your on your Instagram site is you have not only pictures of all these white gangs, the ones that a lot of Rising Up Angry worked with at the time, but you also have pictures of black gangs and groups of black people and Latinos. And
right, I do
know that there was serious tension between some of these different racial and ethnic groups, but we also know there was starting, and what Rising Up Angry tried to do was an overlap and to try to interconnect and show the similarities. I think the black groups then were called Gousters, and it was similar style clothes. You'd have like some fancy bell-bottom pants and little pointy A1 stay pressed pants or baggy work pants, black leather jackets. And the Gousters definitely wore those great big sombreros, big hats, cool looking hats that Ronnie Bronsky used to wear too. Can you give me a little insight into the racial tension and the racial coming together around those times?
No doubt, during the turbulent 60s, the racial tensions were very high, and more particularly within the suburban, but also the south side in neighborhoods such as by Gage Park, by Tilden Tech over there. There's also been, there was the racial tension up there, way up north by Edgewater, by Uptown. There were riots at Sen High School back in 1970, 71. And those were covered by the local news in the Sun-Times and the Tribune. And there was turbulence, and mainly because it was a change of environment. These neighborhoods were very segregated. They were redlined, particularly by race for a long time. Like for the long time, a little village over there by 26th Street, right? And that was mainly Czech and Bohemian for a long time until about the 1950s and 60s. That's when the Slavic population started moving out and fearing for their safety. So, the Latino community moved in and took over that neighborhood. These days, we see it's for the positive. There's been a lot of successful businesses. The crime rate is still high up there, but that's neither here nor there. But the point is, the divisions were there since the start, but over the years, they've integrated more. Now we're seeing clubs and gangs with members of all colors, and nobody's making color the focal point. There's a film which Rising Up Angry contributed to called The Trick Bag, right? That discusses quite a bit of it. And those tensions in the 70s.
That's a movie that Peter Kuttner and I made it was Rising Up Angry and Kartemkin Films, and it has the earlier period of Rising Up Angry where we're talking with young guys and some girls, about issues, but then later it gets into healthcare and housing, because when we started Rising Up Angry, it was pretty much off the militant line of the Black Panther Party. A lot of criticism of the police, called them pigs. But then the Panthers switched their program from kind of like confrontation with the police to serving the people with healthcare programs, et cetera. And Rising Up Angry did that too. We still, I think the image of Angry was the younger guys from different parks around the city where we'd go out, we'd meet people, we'd talk, we'd go through questions with them, deal with race and women and try to get people to have a better perspective. But it was the Trick Bag film is available, and it's available on your site, I noticed today. People can
took out just the clips that focused on the street clubs mainly, and just showcase them with the link tagging down like where the film can be purchased on the Carter Queen website. And it's been and that clip did numbers. Yeah, it did about 40,000 views in a couple days, if not a week.
Yeah, it's probably more than we got when we showed it around.
Yeah, most definitely.
Thank you for doing that.
No worries. Yeah, that's my pleasure, showcasing new content that's not new, but it hasn't been really shown that publicly, widely, should I say. I've also done some of the members that were featured in that documentary were well known on the streets, like Gary Mason's in it by the Schurz High School scene where they're outside of the high school talking. Yeah, just a couple well-known guys.
What club was he in?
He was a part of the Palmer Street Gaylords. That would be by California and Fullerton, by 14th District, Shakespeare.
No, I remember that part in the video. Do you remember much about the Core?
Oh, yeah. The Core was by Old Town, by Armitage, and by Hudson.
Right, and they were like a group of the Hudsons, the Mohawks.
Yes, that's right. The Hudsons, the Mohawks, and then...
the North Parks. And I think you discovered some old gang graffiti that was still written on Lincoln Park High School.
Oh, there was. Yes, I did.
What did it say?
What did it say? Well, there was one that I discovered when you cut into that alley that goes like the letter L. There's one that says "Power to the People" on it. And very visibly, too. And I took a photo for it. Yeah, we could include it in this video. And there's one, like, it says it faintly, but you could definitely see it if you pay attention. Power to the people, right?
We used to say the walls were the pages in the people's book. And we wrote a lot of Rising Up Angry, all power to the people, serve the people, respect the sisters. We wrote a lot of that stuff. Can you talk a little bit more about any encounters you've had with black gangs? And
of course I can.
And then go ahead.
Of course, yeah. And now I've done quite a few sit downs and interviews with Black members of, like mixed gangs, such as the Harrison Gents. It was a Black member that originated by Uptown up there, born by the South Shore neighborhood, but moved up by Uptown. And Paul Jordan, that is his name. Paul's a fascinating character because he was a part of the Harrison Gents for a long time as a kid. And he's got a brother that's very successful in Hollywood. And that is one of the aspects of the Black culture which I covered, just their rising up through the turbulence in the streets back then. Black clubs, which I've sat down with, certainly been the Disciples too, the Vice Lords. They got really good stories coming up on the west side, the conservative Vice Lords, more specifically by the Holy Land of 16th and Lawndale. West Side area over there. They've been around since 1957 or 8, I believe, or 59. But they're still out here in very large numbers. And for a couple of years, they tried to achieve a political motivation and message where they wanted to go into politics and maybe be like an alderman or something. But their opportunities were limited back then.
Well, Josh, you're doing great work. I really appreciate it. You did mention early at the outset the street culture, and it's still going on. I mean, there's still, we know that there are, there's a lot of gang activity on the north side. I'm sure there are in other areas. They don't seem like they're too respectful of each other these days, and they don't seem like they're too into the, using their grouping, the collective of people call themselves a gang or a club to enhance life for everybody. Give me your take on the current culture of gangs and street stuff.
Of course, my current take is that as soon as the alliance was the people and then the folks alliance that was originated within Stateville Penitentiary back in 1978, that has since kind of it deteriorated. We're seeing a lot more new alliances come about with clubs that are closer to each other rather than connected into a prison alliance. During the 2000s, when I was coming up in my neighborhood and it getting to be more rational, and I noticed that there were still close alliances and people were getting along more or less within the gang culture. These days, there's a lot of young kids out here with powerful machinery or weapons of such, and they feel like they don't need to take any orders from the elder members. The elder members, most of them, they're not doing too well. They're either living in senior centers or some of them are homeless even. So the younger kids don't feel like they need to listen to somebody that hasn't made it in life. Do you know what I mean? So the current state is not a positive one, but it's going at a consistent rate where people are just making up these new alliances and they're surely making money too. But is it righteous? I don't think so. It's definitely not. And not the clubs which we grew up knowing back in the 70s and 1980s and the 60s even. And there's a part of me that feels like the message and the whole point of it to keep it for your own neighborhood that's been lost. These days they're just doing it for the money, for the clothes and the clout.
I want to thank you for coming on. I want to let everyone else know that the second printing of the Rising Up Angry book is out. There's a new set of Rising Up Angry t-shirts. You could probably find out more information if you get a hold of Live from the Heartland Show at gmail.com, or you can use my email, fatback@aol.com. You probably could even ask Josh, and he'll steer you in our direction.
Oh, man, I'm always telling people, pointing them in the direction to shop with our Rising Up Angry guys, because that book is impressive that you put together.
Right on. And I want to thank everybody.